Welcome. Disclaimer, I am not a pilot. I am an enthusiastic flight simmer. Do not use this video to learn how to fly a plane. It's just to help me remember how I get the most out of flight sim. In today's video, we're going to look at what happens when you enter a route into Flight Sim's world map, and yet when you go to fly it, it's not what you were expecting, and what we can do to rectify that on the fly, so to speak. So today we are flying from Lydd on the South Kent coast of England across the English Channel to Calais, Dunkirk. So let us plot a route for this. Let's look at the RNAV 24 approach. These are now called RNP in real life. So Flight Sim gives us this. There's a few menu options that'll give us a bit more detail. If we press F to open the filters, come down to the bottom and we look at nav aids, we can see any beacons that might help us. So this has immediately brought up a beacon at the end of the runway called ILS, which is unusual because it looks like an ILS beacon. It's got an ILS type of frequency, but they're not normally called ILS. They have a three-letter name particular to that particular beacon. There's no ILS approach listed for Calais Dunkirk, nor is there ILS in Navigraph. So we're going to forget that there's an ILS beacon here. And the other thing that we can do that makes navigating a bit easier is open this fix an RNAV position report. So now we can see the names of these various waypoints where we're making changes. So we're going to come across the channel and then we get on the RNP approach at Traker. We fly to Sudod, we turn onto the base leg, we get to Dipka and we turn onto final, picking up FAC 24 into the runway. So how does that look compared to what we might see in Navigraph? This is a Navigraph chart for Calais for RNP runway 24, and it's exactly what we've got in Flight Sim. So we're going to start our initial approach at Traker, getting the initial approach fix, Sudod, Dipka, FAC 24 into the runway. And we've got a decision height here of 261 for an LPV approach and the same for an LNAV VNAV approach. So LPV is localizer performance with vertical guidance, and it isn't a localizer, it's a GPS approach, so it's not a precision approach. And LNAV VNAV is a type of older version of LPV, and it's not quite as precise in that LPV could get you lower than an LNAV VNAV approach might, although both of these have the same decision altitude that we're going to need to enter into the plane's computer. Right then, let's see what Flight Sim actually does with this approach when we load it. Here we are on the runway at Lydd. Normally what I'm about to do now we would do before we reach the runway. Going to put in a minimum for this flight. So we go to minimums, and the minimum was a barometric minimum of 261 feet. Enter. So what that does is it does two things. It enters barometric minimum 261 here, which functions as a sort of post-it note on the screen to remind you. The other thing it does is as the plane descends through 261 feet, it will announce minimums. If you can't see the runway at that point, you should abort the landing. But you know, this is Flight Sim, so we can take our chances with it. Another thing that I would like to do is set the speed bugs. Speed bugs are here. They give us a reminder of the various speeds that we can do things. VR is our rotate speed when we pull back on the yoke. VX is our fastest rate of climb, which is handy if you're approaching the side of a mountain. VY is our most efficient rate of climb, and VAP is our approach speed. We don't need to see VAP for takeoff, so I'm going to hide that one. Now let's have a look at the flight plan. Let's zoom out on the map. We're looking for the magenta line. Where is it? Where is it? It isn't there. So this is not the flight plan that we loaded. Something's gone wrong in Flight Sim, but we wanted to fly an RNP 24 runway approach with our initial approach fix at Traker. So how would we fix this? We would go to this main screen here. Home, flight plan, procedures, Approach. So we've got here the RNAV 24 LPV approach. Transition. We want to transition at the tracker initial approach fix. We can load and activate that. Let's have a look now at what the map looks like. That looks so much better. So that looks like what we saw in Navigraph. Across the channel, tracker, pseudod, base leg, final. Let's brighten up the panel lights. Parking brake off, inertial separator is on, that's what we would want, let's go. And flaps are set for takeoff here, you can see it here. I'm just going to zoom in on here, you'll see there's an R there for rotate. Gently pull back on the yoke, up we go, let's raise the landing gear. Bit steep. Get to about 120 knots and come to regular flaps. There we go. Well, let's fly to 3,000 feet on our current heading. So I've clicked the heading bug to move that to the direction that we're facing. And I want to get there using a vertical speed of 124 knots, which is our VY speed. So I've just twiddled that dial, it's set that to flight level change, 124 knots, which is, sorry, not a vertical speed, it's flight level change, it's the other thing. Let's turn the autopilot on. Your dampers come on at the same time to stop the plane swinging around too much. We want that, and we are flying heading. Let's have a look at the map. Zoom it in a bit. Okay, we need to come around to the right. We twist this heading knob and we want to hit this magenta line at an angle of about 45 degrees. So to do that, we want this magenta arrow to be pointing at this little white marker here under where it says heading 137 degrees. I mean, we can also select nav now on the autopilot. So it isn't actually flying the purple line yet because it hasn't found it. So what it's doing in green is it's flying the heading that we set. When it gets near the purple line, it will change to FMS or Flight Management System, and it will start flying the course that we've loaded. So we're on it now. It's picked up the FMS. Bye bye England. So they've given us an altimeter setting of 3044, which is in inches of mercury. We change that with Baro here, 3044. Now we've got the correct altitude above sea level on our altimeter. Let's have a look at what altitude that we need to use to switch off the correct inches of mercury reading and go on to standard. Look at the charts for lid. Info 6,000 feet, so we do not need to go on to Standard Baro of 29.92 until 6,000 feet. So below 6,000 feet we're going to keep on the altimeter setting that ATC has provided us with of 30.44. We could also have a look and see what the weather is doing in France. If we scroll down to the airport here, we can look at waypoint info. Gives us airport information, weather, it's got an altimeter reading here of 1030. That's in hectopascals, which is what most of Europe uses. America uses inches of mercury. So we could change our altimeter setting to hectopascals, and we can do it over here. PFD settings, other PFD settings, altitude units, hectopascals, and now we've changed it to here. But the next time we hear from air traffic control, because it's Flight Sim and it's Microsoft, they're going to give us the American inches of mercury. So let's not leave it on that. Let's take it back to inches of mercury. We can also look at the computer to see when are we going to begin our descent. To do that, we look at our flight plan So here, flight plan, VNAV. So we do have a VNAV profile set up. Time to top of descent is 4 minutes 50. So we'll come back in 4 minutes and activate the VNAV descent. Oh, look at that. It's -2 outside. Let's get the heaters on. Doesn't do anything, but why not? I've also forgotten to turn off the inertial separator, which is like an ice vein that keeps debris out of the engine. The crew alert system is telling me that, so let's turn that off. There we go. So that is exactly the right flight plan. We went into the Garmin in this TBM, changed it to Traker transition. It's exactly what ATC have just confirmed to us. And they've also told us to not exceed 170 knots, so I am dialing back the airspeed. Hello France, or rather a bonjour. That's the next thing that we're going to be doing is preparing to land. I'm going to go back to speed bugs. We don't need to see our VR, our rotate speed, on the display, but VAP, our approach speed, would be useful. Before landing, we could also check that our landing gear lights work. Yep, they're all flashing, that's good. So we should have done that before we headed off really, but better late than never. Another thing that we could do is change the heading bug to the orientation of the runway for final approach. Let's have a look at that. The final approach here is 240 degrees, which is also on this briefing strip here, final approach course 240. So let's put our heading bug at 240. So this is what I'm changing here, heading now set to 240, which is this cyan bug here. So when we're coming into land, we would expect to see that cyan bug more or less at the top of the screen. Might not be exactly right because the winds might be pushing us away from that, but roughly right. So the plane's just announced vertical track as we've come within 1 minute of the top of descent. So we do need to change our altitude. Traker says here is at 2,000 feet. That's what we've got over here, 2,000 feet. So let's enable vertical navigation and start dialing down the altitude to 2,000 feet. If we don't dial that altitude down, even though we've told the autopilot to use vertical navigation to 2,000 feet, it won't do it. We have to, as a double check, have our altitude set to the right setting. You can see path is in white here. When this magenta chevron, I guess you'd call it, hits this line, path should go green and we should be on the vertical path down to 2,000 feet. Here we go. And the plane is now altitude seeking. It's seeking 2,000 feet. I'm going to throttle back a little bit here because we've got 43 torque. We probably only need about 30-ish. So as you can see, we've had a nice gentle slide down from 4,000 feet, coming through 3,000 feet at 150 knots, so below the 170 maximum that ATC told us. And we're getting ready to make our left turn at Traker. Looking for the airport over here to my left somewhere, can't quite see it yet. Telling us now BOD within 1 minute, BOD was bottom of descent. So once we hit this target altitude of 2,000 feet, we're going to be going slowly because our throttle is at the setting to descend. And we're now at the right altitude, so we've found the altitude, so we could throttle back up. So we were in the mid-40s, I think, to keep us just below 170 knots. Let's have a look at what altitudes we need to be reaching on our descent. Navigraph is telling us 2,000 feet at Traker, which is what we've just passed. Sudod no change. Dipka is still at 2,000 feet, and then if we look at this approach here, 2,000 feet all the way until FAC 24. Then we pick up the glide path and begin descending. So we are fine at 2,000 feet all the way until FAC 24, when we will pick up the glide path. That looks like the runway over there to our left. We're on the downwind leg at the moment. We've passed the initial approach fix. Let's turn the landing lights on. Landing lights look like this. So they're these white lights at the end of the wings, but they're visible way, way below us. They're the landing lights. So the last altimeter setting that we had from ATC was 3042. So I've changed it here. I hadn't done it earlier on the flight, which I should have done, was change it here as well, so that if we had a problem with these screens below, we would still have a screen that showed us airspeed and our correct altitude above sea level. And let's just have a look at the approach plate on Navigraph and see what would we do if we had to go missed. What should we have in the plane's computer? So a missed approach, we would climb to AC50, which is straight ahead, continuing this course of 240 degrees, and then back to Takeoff, climbing to 2,000 feet. So I'm going to keep the altitude at 2,000 feet here, because if anything went wrong and we went missed, we could quickly set a vertical speed or a flight level change to go back up to 2,000 feet. On our base leg, still can't really see the runway clearly. So we are on turning onto final now. So our next waypoint, fact 24, which is here, is where we pick up the glide path. And we can see now we've got this G that's gone magenta with this magenta diamond. As we near the glide path, which is all GPS based, this diamond will slide down. We can hit approach on the autopilot, we'll pick it up, doesn't matter what we've got in altitude here, approach will override that and we will follow the glide path down to the runway. So here it goes, the diamond is on the move, let's hit approach. Now we can see the autopilot is looking for the glide path because it's white, but it hasn't found it yet. When it finds it, it will go green. So how far away are we from the runway, I wonder? We should find out as soon as we go past fact 24. So we're 6 miles from the runway. We found the glide path, it's gone green. Let's lower our flaps. Throttle back a little bit below 150 and drop the gear. Here goes the landing gear. Go to below 120-ish knots, round about 120, and we can go to flaps for landing. How are we looking? We're looking good. We can see the runway. We're descending on the autopilot on the glide path, and we can also see our approach speed bug that we entered earlier, which is here, AP. So that's our approach speed. And remember, we set our minimums to 500 feet above the ground. We set our minimums to 261 feet, so when we go past 261 feet here, the plane should announce minimums, and if we couldn't see the runway then, we should abort. There's our minimums alert. Come off the autopilot, throttle back a little bit. And here we are at Calais, Dunkirk. Cold and dark. The plane, not the weather.